Welcome. Welcome, my friends. Today is a very special day. We are doing a live streamed Q&A roundtable discussion all about violin pedagogy, violin performance, and the intersection with martial arts. My name is Lynn Kuo of Violin with Dr. Lynn, and I am going to be interviewing two very special guest artists that I invited from around the world. This is truly an international discussion. I'm in Toronto, Canada, and my first guest is from Los Angeles, United States, and my second guest is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Now, before we get started, there's a bit of housekeeping. Those of you who might be tuning in on Facebook, if you start to comment, we won't be able to see who you are. We will just see Facebook user. So take a second right now to go in and enable StreamYard permission. It's going to look like let StreamYard see your Facebook Live comments. So go ahead, start clicking around, see if you can enable that before I introduce you to my guests. And for those of you that are attending live right from the start, welcome. You're very punctual. Please say hi in the chat. We love to see where you are in the world. Here, why don't I do that right now? I'm going to say, hello, I'm in Toronto. Okay, I started. It's your turn. Okay, so start acting into the chat, typing into the chat, activate those thumbs. We'd love to see who you are and where you're from. Okay, so my first guest, this is going to be really exciting. My first guest is the chair of the Chamber Music Institute at the Colburn School of Music and director of string studies at California State Long Beach. Now, this guest has been a lifelong martial artist. You're going to hear more about his journey in martial arts, and I'm going to show you some really great footage of Rebel Tsigan, him on stage with orchestra. Welcome first to my first guest, Dr. Moni Simeonov.
Hi, good to be here.
Hello, Moni. Nice to see you. So we connected over the pandemic, I believe, didn't we?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So we got
our common friend Matt Young introduced us
from San Francisco. Yeah. I hope Matt is going to show up and watch this at some point. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Wow, we've got some great people showing up here. We got, let's say hello to a few people. We got Anne from Munich. Hello, Evan from Dallas. Hello, Raven from Copenhagen. I got your question, Raven. Ching, hello, Connecticut. We got, Cheryl from LA. Yay, you're close by. And we have Karen from Brazil. We've got, W.H. Palmer from Campbell. We've got, my mouse has stopped working. Hi, Wendy from Ann Arbor. Steve, nice to see you. Nice to see you, Steve. Okay, and then Alessandro from Italy. Nice to see you. Great. Okay, so now I'm going to introduce you to my second guest. My second guest is coming to us almost at midnight bedtime for this fellow here. He's the artistic director of a company that he created in Malaysia called Musicians Linkage. It's a company that he formed to help further the careers of musicians, young and old. He's also a violin lecturer at UCSI University and Sunway University in Malaysia. One of his many claims to fame, in addition to studying multiple martial arts, is playing all 24 violin caprices by Niccolò Paganini, as well as all the solo virtuoso violin works by Ernst. Please welcome to this live stream, Dr. Chia-Chien Goh. Hey, Dr. G.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Still awake, still alive.
Yeah. Hello, Rebecca. I just want to say hello to a few more people here. Hello, Ian from Edmonton. Yay, Canadians. Okay. So it's a pleasure to have you two gentlemen here with me. And thank you from all of us online and from me for donating your time for this very, very special event. Chen, I think you said in a previous conversation, you said, this is going to be big in the violin world.
Yes, because I don't think anybody has really done that much in cross-disciplinary discussions regarding violin performance and pedagogy, because let's face it, it's a very competitive world, in violin. And I think just even if you take competition out of it, to really get the most out of what we're capable of doing on the instrument, it's always nice to look at another discipline and see how they can help each other.
Absolutely. And it's funny because I found you on Facebook, I found Moni on Instagram, and it was really quite shocking for me to see how deeply entrenched and wise you both were in martial arts. And I realized in my, let's say, very short career as a martial artist, 6 years or so, I started to understand the benefits of studying a martial art for not just violinists, but for all musicians. So this whole live stream, I would like everyone to have some context of how this live stream came about. I mean, Chen, you and I started chatting first, but it started to revolve around a comment that I got on my YouTube channel. And I remember chatting with both of you, Moni and Chen, about this comment. And I posted a photo of myself on my YouTube community tab of me after finishing training, wearing my karate gi. And I wrote that martial arts has sharpened my mental and emotional strength beyond any violin training that I've ever received. And I teach my students these same mind-body principles to help make them stronger performers. And that forms the philosophy for my coaching and my teaching for anyone who wants to work with me and improve their skills as a violinist. Now, the comment that I received was, how can you be a good violinist when you use your hands to smash another human being? Violin needs precision. I am a professional violinist, and I can do nothing violent with my hands or mind. This is not a good example to follow. Tai Chi, that's a different story. Good luck. That's the comment that I received. Because I had also started Tai Chi, and so I guess they were saying, well, karate is a bit too violent. Tai Chi, okay, fine, you can do Tai Chi. That is complementary to the violin. I would like to start this live stream off with this subject. First of all, it actually dovetails really nicely into Holly's question. We have some pre-submitted questions. Holly is one of my students. Hi, Holly. And her question was, has studying martial arts helped or influenced how you practice the violin? And if so, how? So my question for both of you is it truly dangerous for musicians to study a martial art? And if there are those risks, are they outweighed by the benefits? And what benefits would there be? Who would like to go first?
Go ahead, Dr. G.
Okay, thank you, Moni. Is it dangerous to study a martial art as a musician? I think that, in my opinion, it depends on which martial art you choose. Because every individual, as an artist in their expression, is going to gravitate towards, probably most likely towards, a different martial art that suits their styles, their sense of expression, and the safety of their craft in a different way. For example, if a person is not very active, a less active art would probably suit them better. Somebody is more active with a different background, then a more active art would be, more conducive. However, the simple thing is that there are some practices in certain arts that are dangerous for anybody, in craft with their hands. And the thing is that if you have a good instructor, they will help you get around that and not have to train that and destroy your joints and your hands and feet. For example, I remember when I studied Kyokushin karate. Yeah, I still practice a lot of it, but I do not sit there and do handstand push-ups on my fingertips, because it doesn't. That's just, it builds things up in my finger joints that I really don't need for my violin. So there are certain things that I don't practice. And of course, with any sport that you pick up, any activity, there are going to be risks. If you go running, you could get hit by a deer. Okay, there's the moment you walk outside of your door, there's going to be a risk. So to say there's an elevated risk, I'm sorry, but if you're practicing Tai Chi in the in a park in the morning, your biggest risk is probably getting hit by bird poop on your head. So it's really, but it's still a risk. So is there a risk? Anything you do in life is going to have a risk.
True.
But you have to pick something that suits you and your sense of expression, personal expression. That would be my answer to that. Over to you, Dr. Simeonov.
I agree completely with what you just said. I find that the risk has a lot to do with your motivation for doing it as well. So you could choose something that's inherently dangerous and practice it safely, and also the other way around. I think that there is no inherent risk to practicing the violin, and yet I've seen so many people get physically and emotionally, psychologically injured by it just because of the way they practice it. And very often it's not even their choice, it's just the situation that they've been put inside. But I think it has to do with the balance between tolerance to flaws, ambition, competitiveness, career goals, and all of that. And I think that we can practice anything safely as long as we are able to see the big picture rather than get stuck inside a situation with tunnel vision and just live for today's successes and forget about the large perspective of where this art or skill or workout falls in our large scheme of life.
Yeah, I love that you're both really great examples of extremely high level martial artists, and yet you play at extremely high levels. I'd like to take this opportunity to show our audience a few video clips, if I may. So you're going to be pleasantly and actually pleasantly surprised, and in addition to being amazed at the virtuosity of these violinists. Because could you please just share with us your level of martial arts training? Moni, could you just share your background, how many years and what disciplines, and same with you, Dr. Goh.
Sure. So I started Kyokushin Karate just as Dr. G. I started that when I was back in Bulgaria before moving to the US. And in about 2007, I started Judo. And in 2009, 2010, I started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I've been doing martial arts all my life, but the one that I'm currently doing is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I've been doing it since 2009 with a little interruption over the pandemic.
How about you, Chen?
I started with Taekwondo. Actually, my martial arts journey began studying with my father when I was really little, because he was a lifelong martial artist. And from there, as I grew up, I started taking classes in other things. And so I really started to really love wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai. I of course, I did Taekwondo, and Kyokushin, like Dr. Simeonov here. And but it was basically, I was into MMA. But I think something that I like to touch on, that, you know, the comment you had brought that had started off this whole thing about, you know, not beating people and stuff like that, is Tai Chi. People thinking that it's a peaceful art. And if you study it, let's say when you reach like a really high level, like maybe 4th, 5th dan black belt in karate, and you go and you approach Tai Chi, you see it in a whole different way. After studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and karate, and then going into Tai Chi, I realized it's a very, very effective art if used correctly. It's got some amazing grappling, and we can really see the roots of where a lot of the martial arts come from. And in a quite deadly fashion. It's just practiced slowly for a reason. If you practice it correctly, within less than 5 minutes, you are sweating buckets from the amazing concentration that you go through, because today's practice is more about health. But if you can see where those movements are coming from, the ideologies behind them, it's lethal. So I would beg to differ on anybody that says that it's just a simple, peaceful thing that grandma, grandpa does in the park in the early morning with really bad Chinese music. It's a great, healthy thing, but it's also effective if trained properly.
So it is interesting because we have this comment from Ian here. Thank you for the comment. You also practice Tai Chi, and the martial art is not suitable for violinists. Now, I mean, I agree and I disagree, because we have a question that came in from Raven. Hi, Raven. Hope you're watching. Have any of you sustained an injury that happened while training or competing? And if so, what kind, and how did it influence your training, and how did it influence your violin practice? Now, I really want to show everyone the videos, your playing videos, before we answer this question. So now you have a context of the breadth of martial arts training that these gentlemen. Hi, Raven. Great, I see you. This is fantastic. He's here on YouTube. There he is. Hey, Raven. So we have a sense of how long these gentlemen have been training lifelong martial arts. In their culture, it's in their blood, it's in their philosophy. I only started about 6 years ago. But let me just show you. Let's see if I can do this properly. I'm going to share with you. Let's see. First, I'm going to show you. Yes, here we go. Moni's, Dr. Simeonov's Revel Tsigan. Now remember, bear in mind that Dr. Simeonov has been a lifelong martial artist. Can we see this? Is that a yes? Am I sharing the right screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Here we go. I'm going to skip to the very end. All right, so that is Moni in his full power. Oh, now I'm going to share Dr. G. This is probably one of the funniest things greatest things I've ever seen. Maybe get this one. Everyone, this is going to be Dr. G. Oh, oops, I got the wrong button here. Bear with me here. Share screen. I'm sharing this one. Can we see this?
Yes.
Yes. Great. Perfect. Okay, this is Dr. G. Remember, lifelong martial artist. Here we go.
He loves fishing. This is Dr. Goh. He goes to the gym. This is Dr. Goh too. He plays the violin. Oh yeah, he loves fighting too.
I love
Hey
that.
babe, pick a cup. Happy birthday.
Stop sharing. Okay. All right. So, oh wait, just a sec. I have to. There we go. Okay. Yeah. So this is the extent of your abilities, both of you. It's quite amazing. Yeah. So I hope everyone can see that violin and the martial arts have paired very well with these gentlemen. From my experience, let's answer this question that Raven asked. Have any of you sustained an injury that happened while training or competing? And if so, what kind? And how did it influence your training, and how did it influence your violin practice? Well, yes, I personally have experienced an injury. It was before playing the Nutcracker show. In sparring, I accidentally got my finger caught, and then sparring had to completely stop. And I did play Nutcracker that evening, but it was just a little bit tender. So you're right. There are some risks involved, but my personal opinion is that there are so many more benefits to training for the mind, for the body, and emotional resilience that one can, as Dr. Goh said, train with mindfulness in mind. Don't do finger push-ups or handstands, but it's going to jeopardize the delicacy of your finger precision. Absolutely. For example, I would like to show here, hey, hello, Sensei Erez. Sensei Erez is a second degree, or is it third degree black belt in my dojo in Toronto. What's up? So I hope that Sensei Erez, you can testify that our dojo is very sensitive to musicians. In fact, Sensei Erez is a professional guitarist, and he's now has multiple black belts in our karate dojo. Hi, Carol. What is your doctorate in? Are you a medical doctor? Dr. Goh? Dr. Goh?
My doctorate is doctor of what is that? Musical arts. So if anybody's got a health problem and I'm around, they're dead. I can't do anything about it.
Same, Dr. Moni. What about you?
Same thing. Yeah.
Same. It's so funny because when I had my finger pulled, and we all have doctorates. It's hilarious. Anyone got a Band-Aid? No, sorry, I don't know how to put on a Band-Aid. But okay, let me just quickly share one more video. This happens to be my green belt exam. I'm just going to share 10 seconds, just 10 seconds, if I can find it. Here it is. Okay, so you're going to see here that my hands are completely falling from my fist. That is my sensei, Chia-Chien Goh. He's the one who taped up my fist because, like Dr. Goh said, it's really important to wait. How do I stop the share? Stop screen. Stop sharing. Yeah, it's really important to be mindful of a musician's hands. So right before I hit the sparring portion of my green belt exam, he had completely protected my fingers so that I could never, ever have any chance of pulling a finger in sparring. So it is possible to get the benefits, the exercise benefits of martial arts, as well as be mindful of what you need to do to perform, to show up at a show or a concert that night. So, but I am curious, Moni and Chen, what injuries you might have sustained and how did you get past them, or did they threaten your playing at all?
I'll start, I guess. I pulled a muscle in my right shoulder, and it was extremely painful. And I thought that I would not be able to use my right arm properly. It recovered because it was a minor thing that felt like something a lot more serious, I guess. But that was the time when I wasn't sure what was going to happen with my playing or my workout regimen, that I started reading a lot of books about teaching, and not just about teaching music, but about coaching chess, teaching foreign languages, coaching basketball, martial arts. And I started learning what the background of the teaching process was, independent of the facade, independent of the actual sphere of knowledge. So what the underlying principles of all teaching was. And that's when I decided, and this happened maybe 13 years ago. And obviously I've done a lot of playing and a lot of fighting after that. So things are back to normal. I mean, things were back to normal a few months after. But that's when I decided that what I have to give to the world is more in the thinking, writing about teaching rather than performing. And I've really played a lot since then, but I feel like my contribution will not be through performing. It'll be through conceptualizing and explaining.
How about you, Chen? Injuries. I think you told me you had a big one back in the day.
I've had a few, but I can't, to tell you the truth, the absolute worst ones I've had were not in the dojo. They were in the gym. And I think the really horrible ones were all my fault for not concentrating properly on what I was doing. For example, right before I did my first time through of playing all the Ernst works, 2 days before, I knew the recital was there. I was training my endurance, so I was doing a lot of leg work. And somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, Chen, you can go a little farther down on the leg press." I was like, "Yeah, I can," without looking at the fact that I had the whole thing loaded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I let it down a little bit. When I pushed, I felt a pop on my right side. And so I quickly put up the weights, locked it in, and I realized I couldn't lift anything with my right side anymore. So I went and played the whole recital, the next night, and it was okay. I just couldn't breathe very well because, it's the floating rib. The next day, the day after the recital, I went to the doctor to get an X-ray, and we discovered one of the muscles from my core had yanked off a piece of one of my floating ribs. And I asked the doctor, "Is anything we need to do, surgery or something?" He said, "There's nothing you can do. You have to wait for your body to reattach it." So yeah, I just had to put up with not being able to breathe all the way in for a week. But I discovered that if you practice properly on your violin, so you're relaxed, it really didn't have any effect on my violin playing. The only injuries, there are two other major injuries I can talk about, but the one that really affected me was when doing deadlifts and I didn't concentrate properly. I was really angry at a work situation and I blew my lower back. So I walked around something like a crab for a bit.
Wow.
And so I had to play sitting down. I couldn't practice standing up. That one is nobody's fault. It's not a martial arts training problem. It's my own. There are martial arts injuries I've sustained, but again, those were all my own stupidity. I do not blame the art or anybody involved because I let my concentration go. It wasn't somebody else's fault.
I have to agree with you. I've been able to train safely, as someone who wasn't ever athletic as a youngster. Never. I never considered myself athletic. And people assume that I am. Maybe in the second half of my life thus far that I've become athletic. And actually, martial arts has really surprised me. I never, ever would have dreamed to come close to where you two gentlemen have come. Ever. When I walked into the dojo for the first time, all I had done was body combat gym classes. That was the furthest I have. You're probably going to laugh. It sounds very comical to me right now, actually. But I remember people saying, this is very dangerous for your hands. Are you really sure you want to do this? And the thing that I discovered coming out of the dojo was how empowered I felt. Actually, Sensei Erez, who's still watching, hi Sensei Erez, he heard me talking about this maybe 3-4 days ago. We had a birthday party for one of our friends at the dojo, and I told him how empowered training in the karate dojo has made me feel. And that has translated into how I show up as a human being, not just as a violinist, but as I show up as a human being. When you are faced with a skill or let's say a sparring partner that is, let's say, especially for me, since I'm a small person who is physically dominating you, you are forced to confront a fear. And when you feel the physiological effects of your fear, racing heart rate, perhaps sweaty palms, perhaps a fight or flight reflex, you are forced to do what you have to do to survive, to navigate the situation in real time, and conduct yourself with composure and respect for yourself and your sparring partner. And now I don't say opponent, I say partner. And you can choose to substitute the other word you like. Chamber music partner, string quartet stand partner, orchestra stand partner, whatever you like. So through the practice of sparring, through the practice of a martial art, I've learned that my heart may be racing. This activity might be scary or might be challenging physically. I might be running out of stamina. I might be running out of mental focus and willpower. But you learn how to push through. Now, what does that teach us? It teaches you that you can become stronger than you think you are. You've proven that in the fact that you've had injuries, both of you, and yet you've endured, you've persevered. So persevere is one of the key words and one of the key philosophies that and values that comes out of pursuing a martial art. Perseverance, despite the fact that you're struggling against an opponent or a situation. And how does that translate to us as a musician? Well, look at how many times we are put into a situation of pressure. Competition, a recital, a jury, an orchestra audition. How about an audition for a teaching job? All of these situations are putting a person under pressure. Where do you learn how to compose yourself under pressure? In a martial arts situation. So for the people who say that martial arts is not suitable for a violinist, okay, you have some valid points that it's a risk to your fingers. But as Dr. Chen said, there is a way to train so that you can remain safe. And in fact, you have never had an injury from martial arts. I've never actually stopped playing from a martial arts injury. Yes, I actually hurt my knee about a year ago, and I'm going to get surgery. Yes, that came from martial arts, but I never stopped playing. The only time that I ever stopped playing, could not physically play the violin, was because I got an injury. How did I get that injury? From playing the violin, repetitive strain injury. Is that not ironic? The only time that I ever had to stop playing the violin was because I was playing the violin incorrectly. So it is interesting for me to see that martial arts can certainly give you a lot of benefits. This is going to answer a bit of the questions. Holly's question, has studying martial arts helped or influenced how you practice the violin? It certainly can if you start to learn how to use your body in a safe and smart manner. That's my personal opinion. Silence.
It sounds great. It's so well put.
Thank you. Well, okay, comments. Please, people out there in the universe, tell me what you think. Tell us what you think. Do you agree with that? Or do you completely disagree? Because we've clearly opened up a very interesting conversation that stemmed from the YouTube comment. Can you be a good violinist? How can you be a good violinist when you're smashing humans with your hands? This is
I think maybe, sorry to interrupt you, I feel like the subtext of this is not even so much about the dangers of practicing a martial art, but I think what that person who commented meant was, how can you be expected to conduct something beautiful with your being, and especially with those same hands that you're using to hurt another human being? And I think that this is just, it's a common misunderstanding of what martial arts are. Martial arts are not a fight. Those are something of skills and movements and positions practiced in a controlled setting that has survived, in some cases, thousands of years, for the very purpose of protecting the partner that you're practicing this with. So you're not doing it to hurt someone else. You're doing it to better yourself and to better this other person as well. So I think that we shouldn't be thinking, it's one thing to say, with those same hands that you're using to actually hurt people or living beings in real life, how can you make beautiful art? But this one, I think, there is no equal sign between practicing martial arts and smashing other people.
No. And I think we are answering Rebecca's question. How can the martial arts practice improve one's violin practice and performance? I mean, indirectly, Rebecca, we're answering your question. I mean, I addressed the fact that it really helps shape your mind. We're talking about neuroplasticity. We're talking about neurons being fired. What is wired in your brain what fires in your brain starts to wire together. There's a better way of phrasing that. What fires together wires together. So when you start to train your brain to be more and more resilient to stress, to uncomfortable situations, which you constantly have to face in a martial arts training, something that's unexpected, a grapple, something that you have to work yourself out of, something that you have to defend, you start to become so much more resilient to what is going to feel uncomfortable. And I hear so many times that people step into a concert situation, a chamber music situation, a concerto, and it's the most adrenaline producing situation. It doesn't feel comfortable to have that much adrenaline going through your system. And that's an ancient fight or flight mechanism that we've evolved, has developed in our bodies from evolution. And that's very difficult, if not impossible, to get rid of. If you do not have adrenaline running through your system, you very well might be sociopathic. And I don't come up with that term on my own. That is coming from a previous live stream that I did 3 years ago with a performance psychologist, Dr. Don Green. He said the same thing. Dr. Goh, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I like to more answer her question on that, and go back to something that actually, even before the comment that started this whole thing, I remember somebody that we all know, Roman Kim, was putting some stuff up on Facebook, some movies that he liked, and I commented on something, and he admitted on Facebook that he uses a lot of Bruce Lee's, theories and writings for his own playing. And I like to bring something up because I've done publications and seminars on martial arts and violin playing, violin pedagogy, and things that we have to think about. Some things you touched on already, Dr. Lynn, but some things that also benefit violinists a lot for martial arts. Okay, how does it benefit? We're talking about, let's say, just stage fright. If you look at how a martial arts class begins, okay, let's say a karate class, because Dr. Simeonov, Dr. Lynn, and myself, we've all done a karate of some sort. And normally most classes start off or have an element of meditation somewhere inside the class, in the beginning or something. And if you translate that to your violin playing, I found that using that same breathing, that we did in Chia-Chien, when I'm doing my scales to warm up, that gets me mentally into a place where I am automatically, from my breath, singing and preparing, feeling my hands, my whole body before I engage the next note mentally. So before I physically engage something, my mental, aspects have already gotten the fingers there. I don't even have to physically think much about it. And to add something to it, talking about, nerves and everything. I remember 20 plus years ago, there was a retired neurosurgeon that showed me a little clip from his journal, one of the journals that he was subscribing to. And it said they did an experiment on violinists versus non-violinists, where they were putting all of these electrodes and everything and seeing what parts of the brain were firing. And when a non-violinist was moving the fingers on their left hand, the particular areas of the brains lit up like a Christmas tree. Of course, they knew what it was going to do. But when a professional violinist went and moved the fingers on their left hand, the predicted area of their brain did not fire. The motor reflex skills areas fired. We spend so much time on our violins practicing that those fine, nuanced movements are no longer a conscious effort. If you look at Bruce Lee's writings, because he was fantastic at his philosophy, he was a philosophy major, and he talks about how he practices a movement until it's no longer a conscious effort. It's an effortless effort that reflexively occurs. And you look at that and you apply it to your violin playing. You enable this new, how would you say, connection. Instead of your brain now has, if you realize that your brain now has the freedom to sing beautiful music and physically allow your hands to just do it. Yeah. And so if you understand that you practice with that bigger concept inside, it gives you an artistic freedom you didn't believe was possible. How many times have we had those magical experiences where we've been on stage? We wonder how we did it, but we can't remember much about the performance, but remember the feeling of how beautiful it was on stage doing that performance. They're not that often, but when they happen, they're magic. Imagine if you could do that every single time, because you're able to access that manner of consciousness in your practice. So what about martial arts in violin playing? This is one of the benefits. It allows you to access these things because the cross-disciplinary, the writings, the literature on both sides, if you add them together, it gives you something special. So to answer her question, that's my reply. Sorry, so long.
No, I loved it. This actually triggers something that was just said. Like I said, a couple of days ago, there was a function at my karate dojo, and my sensei, he said, it's interesting because we all have very different journeys in our martial arts. But he said, when you get further and further and further up your martial arts training, you climb up this beautiful mountain. When you reach the summit, you're at the peak of this mountain. You look down, you've reached all these decades of training. You look down, everything looks the same from the summit. But let's say you came from this side of the mountain, and you came from this side of the mountain, and I come from this side of the mountain. You have a different journey from the different side of the mountain that you're on. But when we eventually reach the top, the philosophy, the view, the perspective becomes the same right at the top. I thought it was very beautiful. That is attributed to my sensei, Shihan Kuwan Rajwans. Thank you, Shihan, if you ever watch this. But I thought that was really beautiful. It's almost like we come from different violin teachers, different coaches, different schools of training, Galamian, Delay, or whomever you want to think about, Leopold Auer, whatever you want to think about, all your sources. And we have a different interpretation of vibrato. And we sometimes, some of the questions here have asked, how do you practice vibrato? We each may have a different philosophy in how to approach it. We may each have a different way to express how to shift. But in the end, we're all saying the same thing. We have a different way of expressing it, but at the top, I mean, we're saying the same thing. We want to play the violin beautifully and express human expression through an instrument. It becomes the same at the very, very apex of the art form.
This is, it's again, very beautifully put. And I want to take that idea and share something else with you regarding that cross-disciplinary and being able to get to a point where you look to different sides and you see the same thing just disguised as something else on the surface. When I was finishing up my doctorate, there was a presentation that I did for one of the music education courses that we were required to take. And I started the presentation. It was going to be on, certain methods of teaching. I was focusing on technique, or at least the concept of what we think of as technique in music. And I started with 20 quotes from two seemingly very different books. One of them was by Shinichi Suzuki, Nurtured by Love, his seminal work. And the other one was by Jigoro Kano. It's called Mind Over Muscle. That's Jigoro Kano is the person who codified the principles of judo. And those two Japanese men were born at nearly the same time. They died at nearly the same time. As far as I know, they didn't know each other. And the quotes that I pulled from those books and I put on the screen so that everyone can see, the class couldn't agree which book each quote came from, because at really the high level, when we're talking about the true background of practicing something correctly is exactly the same. You can put an equal sign. When you're talking about respect, beauty, staying on the path, using balance, planning, all of these things, all the high level stuff that's supposed to be the guiding principles for the smallest motions that we do, they are the same. And when I was little, and I'm pretty sure that many people think so now, considering good technique on a violin, to me, when I was little, meant being able to play fast, being able to play clean, and to some extent being able to play loud. I don't know why, but maybe playing fast and clean is what many violinists consider good technique. Now, when we look at martial arts, or let's even take it a step closer to the real world, when we look at working out, simply being able to lift weights, does good technique mean lifting a lot of weight? I don't think that any person in the gym, even those who just started going, would agree with that. Lifting a lot of weight doesn't mean good technique. So if we see a toddler picking up a pen from the floor with correct deadlifting technique, and if we see someone the size of Dr. G, for example, picking up a really heavy weight but with an arched back and with straight knees, one of them has good technique, and it's not the person who picks up the greater weight. However, in violin practice, we often consider the person who is simply able to play a fast passage faster than another person as having greater technique, even if there is considerable muscle tension that would shorten the lifespan of that musician's art. So I think that we should focus on technique as something that means using correct angles, using correct positions, and using correct motions so that we can produce the greater result with the least amount of effort. And that very often is not the case that we're taught. that may be in books, but very often the teacher doesn't really pay attention to that as long as the student plays cleanly and doesn't look too bad.
That actually picks up on a question that someone submitted here, Tomas. If you're going to increase the speed of a piece, how do you do it? Now, this is interesting because I've taken dance as well, salsa dance classes. And I recall that my instructor said, well, the only way to really do a rapid movement is to be able to do it at a rapid movement. I agree with that. So if you need to play a concerto passage very fast, you have to be able to play it fast. Slow practice, let's say ultra uber slow practice, will have its benefits, but if you cannot play that passage and you are only able to play it at that tempo, you have to be able to play it at a tempo. So it's interesting because when you learn, let's say, a combination, right, like a sparring or some kind of sequence, right, you have to be able to do a couple in sequence, just like you have to be able to put a couple of fingers down in advance. How would you answer this question? If you're going to increase the speed of a piece, how do you do it?
I guess I'll go first. If you're going to increase the speed of a piece, how do you do it? Well, I think it depends on the piece, what technical requirements are inside the piece, what are the artistic requirements of the piece. And those should, for me, my artistic process is I go and I try to decide, I look at the energy manipulation of the piece. Where's the beginning? Where's the end? What are the phrases? Where's the culmination point of the whole piece? How do I want to get there? And I make some basic general decisions first, artistically first, before I even look at the technique of the piece. Once that's considered, I start thinking of how I'm going to bring this piece to life. So once that all those considerations are done, because I can't go through all of them because there's so many different types of pieces, they will have different requirements. Once that's done and I know this is a fast piece, I start looking at all the parts that I know need to be very quick. I look at the type of difficulty it is. Is it all running notes? Is it a bunch of really intricate leaps? What is it? Flying triple stops, quadruple stops, whatever it is. And I start looking at any number of practice techniques I know to take it from very slow to very fast, like that. There are rhythm practices, rhythmization, all sorts of things that we can apply, but it basically comes down to running it through a factory of practice techniques to get it from very slow. And I need to add this: when you're practicing slow, a lot of people, sorry, my grammar, when you're practicing slowly, it's really important that you also establish your bare minimum quality that you're going to accept. Yeah, you shoot for your absolute best, and your absolute best should be your minimum. And you're practicing slow, at least in my opinion. And so as you get faster, you don't allow that to drop. If anything, it should improve as you get faster and faster through your factory of practicing techniques. Yeah, and the one thing that a lot of people make a mistake of is that they only practice it one way. Yeah, they run into this factory of, say, rhythmization or something like this, and they only have one idea, of musical idea, how they're going to do it. I would always encourage several ideas so that there's openness of thought and allowance of adaptation and a sense of improvisation when you reach your final finished product. That way, you have choices that you can make in your performance. So as and then I go through the piece, looking at each section that I've already identified, and I see how to bring it to life in many different ways. Because let's face it, we play the way we feel. What is a musician? Why do we exist? We take things that happen in news or in daily life that other people cannot or do not want to deal with, or process. And we go up on stage, we make a social commentary. Okay, it's our expression. We may be a conduit from the composer to the audience, but it's still our voice coming out. So in this respect, we have to make sure we have that flexibility, and we have to practice that in, so that when we go on stage, our emotions, our thoughts, what we have to say comes out naturally. So that's how I would take the piece, and it would be very fast, and it would be at the best playing that we could physically do. That's my short answer to that.
Your long answer one day. Moni, I know that in your Instagram account, you've got an amazing library of practice techniques. I would love to hear what you have to say. I also have something to say too, but I want to hear what you have to say first about how do you get to a point where you're so comfortable under pressure on the stage in performance, going through the factory of practice techniques. You've got a bunch of them. I want to hear what you have to say.
Sure. I mean, I have very little to add to what Dr. G said. Maybe I can just a second here. Can I post something in the comments, and then maybe people, it's just a free exercise.
Please.
Let's see. Did it go through? I think
yes.
It did. Okay,
yes.
So what I wanted to say, which is it combines with what Dr. G said. He was talking about the practice techniques of rhythmization practice. What that does, practicing in different rhythms, and there are many different rhythms. That thing that I posted is 12 pages of stuff that can be used to permutate one passage into something else. So that we can get to know it from all angles rather than just the very facade of the passage. What that does, just for those who practice with different rhythms, they see the benefit, but they don't know quite why, is let's say that we have 4 notes, and if they're spaced out like this, because we play them in the slow tempo, and there is quite a bit of space between them, when we put them very close together, then we have to exercise quick motions, but then we're not able to quite hear what happens. We're not able to prepare each note. But what if we did this? What if we played 2 and then 2 and then so on? We are able to play at a tempo that's twice as fast, but still have all the time in the world to prepare the burst of notes, to reflect on the burst of notes, and to relax so that we can prepare for the next burst of notes. That's what rhythmical practice does. That's why whenever we do dotted practice, it should be almost double dotted practice so that we can have longer to rest, and so on. But I also wanted to segue into Grace's question, which is really important, and I think it leads into what both of you just mentioned. Of course, there is a notion that you could control it, and then you can also let it go. No one wants to be on complete autopilot on stage, even if things go just as planned, because then why are you there? Like, why would you want to drink a very delicious fruit juice and be on autopilot? This is why we're on stage, not to just deliver a product, but to enjoy the experience as well. So I think that, of course, I think it should be required reading for every musician, but one book that everyone should kind of go through, and it's free. I think you can get it in Google Books. If not, then I can just post the PDF here, but it's The Inner Game of Tennis. It's a 1972 book by Timothy Gallwey. Please do not read The Inner Game of Music, because I think that all the defense mechanisms will come up and that it'll prevent you from getting the message of the book. So read about tennis, and then you'll learn about music. So in that book and many other books that have to do with that particular skill training, these are concepts of Zen, and concepts of Zen are concepts of learning well. It means that you shouldn't be controlling it, but you should always be observing it. And by observing it very clearly, you're able to hear all kinds of things that you're completely deaf to if you're trying to control. Because when the mind is busy trying to control, you're not actually noticing what's happening. So I think that Grace's question is a great one for all of us to think about. How can you do it seamlessly and effortlessly and almost in a great way mindlessly, while still observing every single part of it?
I want to add a little bit more to what was just said. So in terms of combining a couple of answers for a couple of questions that have come in that were pre-submitted. We've got so many great questions, but how do we build up speed? This is one of my favorite questions to answer. And how do we compare and contrast? This is a question from Wendy. Compare and contrast self-preparation and readiness practices such as yoga and meditation for the two disciplines of martial arts and music. Okay, so I mean, this goes off into a little bit of more mental, psychological aspects, but when you are practicing to get to your goal, and usually for us, a goal is, well, there's a couple of goals that we have in mind when we're playing the violin. First of all, skill acquisition. We're learning to improve our skill in a certain discipline. As you know, Dr. Simeonov said, it could be chess, it could be dance, it could be martial arts, it could be violin. When you're working on skill acquisition, you're building the neurons in your brain to fire. You're forcing them, not forcing them, but you're encouraging the neurons in your brain to fire in a very specific way. Whether you want to encourage a finger pattern so that you're working on intonation. And there were a couple of questions that we've received about working on intonation. It's one of those things where you have to work on something slowly first. This is actually a great quote that I put on a Post-it note here. This actually comes from Alex Hormozy. Think slow and smooth, then fast. And he's a gym trainer. And I thought that was perfect for martial arts and perfect for me for the violin. So I put it on a Post-it note for myself. So when you are getting yourself ready for practice, self-readiness and readiness practice, like yoga and meditation. Wendy, thank you for that question. Because in yoga and meditation, we often slow down. And that's why I build that into my classes, into my own practice for the violin. And before every karate training, we do a 1-minute meditation. So this is something that has transferred over from my martial arts practice into my violin practice. I build in that time where I can slow down my brain. And it's not just a ritual, it's actually a neuroscientist scientific principle where you want to slow down your brain waves. Typically, we're in beta brain waves. When you slow the brain waves down, and you do so by breathing exercises, meditation, maybe gentle movement, breath awareness, body awareness, visualization, you're bringing your brain waves from beta into alpha. And then when you go into sleep mode, you go into theta. But in alpha brain waves, you're actually getting your brain into a more receptive state. There was a question here we had about how do we study harder, not study smarter, not harder. So this is one of the reasons why I incorporate some time in my practice to slow my brain down. The people in my VIP coaching program will actually join me in my practice sessions, and we will go, before we even pick up the violin, or we might have the violin in hand, we will go through this very martial arts inspired pre-practice ritual where we will do a breathing and a centering. And then we will maybe transition into the instrument and maybe very slow scale. So think slow and smooth, then fast. How can we combine all of this martial arts philosophy into our practice and improve our journey as a violinist or in any skill acquisition, whether it's chess or dance or whatever sport you want to acquire? You bring the brain into a state where it's going to be in a super learning mode. When you bring your brain into quiet, then you will be able to tune out all the other distractions, cell phone ringing, TV channel, or whatever dings are happening on your computer. Can you imagine how much interference this would have on your learning process? So through the process of quieting your brain, just like we learn in the martial arts discipline, you're able to focus much better. Your concentration is heightened. When your concentration is heightened, the distractions are easily pushed aside. Therefore, you're learning smarter and not harder. And that's the philosophy behind how I teach people to practice better. In fact, I will share with everybody, this is going to be segueing nicely. I have prepared a free gift for everyone who's attending this live stream. You can go to my website, lynnkuo.com/practice guide, because I will go further in this guide of what I'm talking about now. How can you take martial arts, all the best things about martial arts, to improve what you can be as a human being and as a person who wants to improve your skill acquisition in any discipline. So how incorporating the concepts of yoga, uniting the mind and the body. Yoga is called union of the mind and the body. When we're practicing a martial arts, we are also focusing the mind and the body to behave under pressure how we want. And as Dr. Goh and Dr. Moni said, you start to train through a factory of practice techniques. And in fact, I have a course called Practice Techniques. When you get that practice guide, you will be led into 2 free previews into my online course called Practice Techniques. So these are universal for whatever discipline you are wanting to improve on, whether it's just learning a new kick, or learning a new strike or a block, or some kind of octave or fingered octave, or polyphonic etude, or paginated caprice, or Izai sonata. You think slow and smooth. And what I love about thinking slow and smooth is that you start to build your body awareness. Because, I mean, Dr. Go, I think you said tension, right? Body tension. One of the things that's going to prevent us from improving faster on the violin is physical tension. And physical tension comes when you are just learning a skill for the first time. When you're learning anything new, you are quite clumsy. And with the clumsiness, it feels uncoordinated. Your muscles are not smooth. And you wonder why you can't do things as smoothly as your instructor. They have embedded it into their neurons in the brain. And people like to talk about muscle memory. It's actually technically not a memory inside your muscle. It's teaching your brain. The brain then sends the message to your muscle. So thinking slowly first, whether you're learning Tai Chi, and this is going to answer some of the questions that came earlier, what martial arts is good for older violinists? I mean, Tai Chi is a great example where it's a slow martial art, of slow practice. In that practice, you can start to think slowly, think smoothly. And I do this just because I was practicing Tai Chi this morning. Thank you, Jonathan, who's my Tai Chi master teacher. But when you have a chance to think slowly and smoothly, look how that is a parallel between the martial arts and learning an instrument. How many times have we had a teacher say, have you done slow practice? We have to do slow practice, don't we? So slow practice is very analogous, let's say, to Tai Chi as it is to another faster or more vigorous art form. You learn the movements slowly, and then it's very much like the Karate Kid, where Miyagi had Daniel doing wax on, wax off, and the paint strokes, just painting a house. And then when he finally tested him, boom, it became reflexive, ingrained. So that when it's built into your neural synapses, it is automatic. You want it to become from consciously incompetent all the way to unconscious competence. Does that make sense? Did everything I say make sense?
May I add just 3 things?
Yes.
Okay, very quickly, but this going back to further the previous discussion, but also this last one. Okay, bringing everything together on the first one is, I remember my late professor, Vartamanugian, he was telling me something in master class. He said, when a violinist performs, they have to go to a different realm of consciousness, a place where nothing and no one can touch them. If I remember correctly, I was doing the Vinyavsky #1 on stage, and I was screwing it up horribly. And this is when he was telling me about it. And we talk about martial arts in violin performance and pedagogy. As you were saying, Dr. Lynn, about getting this the mental preparation before you start your practice, and then as I talked about doing the meditation breath while I'm doing my scales to calibrate my hands. It's all the same thing. We're getting the minds ready. And I remember the first time he got me to that point, I was doing the Sibelius Violin Concerto. He actually led me to this point. And it was as if I had ascended above. I was actually looking at the top of my head, and I was watching my arms just go. Things were just happening freely. And it was the best physical playing that I had ever. It was better than any of the practicing that I had done. So it was allowing the mind to go free. So that is the place that in mixing the disciplines of martial arts into violin pedagogy has allowed myself and a lot of my students to reach at the other things. Frozen there. But anyway, we were talking about, Dr. Lynn, you were talking about the mountain. I remember I was way back when I was doing the errands, I was telling a student of mine, it's like climbing a steep mountain, because I was referencing Sosai Masatatsu Yama, the founder of Kyokushin. He's talking always about going up the mountain. And I realized that every mountain I climbed, whether it was the Paganini or the errands or something else, another project, when I reached the top, I realized that if you look around, there are bigger mountains still around you, and they are twice as beautiful. And you start to realize it's in a range of mountains, and they're all just increasingly gorgeous. And the third thing I wanted to bring up was this. I think it was Bruce Lee who wrote it down, but he got it from somebody else. When I was a beginner, a punch was just a punch, a kick was just a kick. When I was a student, a punch was not just a punch, a kick was not just a kick. When I became a master, a punch was just a punch and a kick was just a kick. So you think about that. And then, sorry, there is one more thing, because Dr. Lynn, you were talking about, muscle memory. Sorry, I'll make this really quick. But, if you look into the science of how fast our muscles get regenerated, because the cells die, they get replaced. Within 2 weeks, the muscles that you have in your forearm are completely new. It's completely new cells. So really, you're right. It's practicing into your mind and into your nerves, not the muscles. That is a myth.
Thanks for having my back on that. Do we have other questions here? We've got a bunch of questions that have come in. Here's a great one from Anne. Is there one crucial mindset that makes you excel both in violin and in martial arts? Teach us, please. I love this question.
Yeah. Sure. I think that when we're talking about mindsets, we should not fail to mention Carol Dweck's book. It's called Mindset. It's a tiny book, and it's based on 40 years of research, and it's one of the most widely quoted books on the psychology of learning. She basically talks about the two different mindsets. One is the fixed mindset, the other one is a growth mindset. And generally, the fixed mindset, I'm just going to oversimplify a difficult concept that's taken many years to develop, but the fixed mindset is the notion, or at least the subconscious belief, that what we do always has to appear correctly and has to appear correct to the rest of the world. And perhaps that stops a lot of people from trying something new, because they would rather play the piece that they know multiple times rather than find a new piece and learn a new one that can potentially expose them to failure. And the growth mindset is adopted by people, or at least subconsciously adopted by people, who don't mind, looking not so great at times, but with that comes a lot of learning. So actually proposing a new concerto to play with this orchestra rather than the one that you've played in the last couple of seasons. And she generally talks about how people who have the fixed mindset have usually been pretty good at a particular skill as younger children, and the parents, teachers, and friends, I guess, have praised not the process of learning those skills, but the status quo of knowing the skill. So praising, oh, you're so good, rather than, oh, you seem to have practiced very well. And when they grow up, a lot of these kids who showed great promise when they first started something, they decrease compared to others who may not have been praised so much as kids, but they didn't fail to take on new and more challenging assignments. Therefore, the trajectories surpassed each other. So that, I think, I just wanted to say that in the world of music, we see a lot of fixed mindset traits, not just people who possess it, but we are exposed. We're constantly on stage and playing in studio classes, lessons, and miniature concerts expose us to the point to where we want to always have our best foot forward. And when you compare 4 years of college education where you stuck to the pieces that you knew, and in a parallel reality, that same person would take on a new piece for every single studio class, and maybe not keep up the reputation of being a flawless player, but at the end of the 4 years would know so many more pieces, would not even deal with stage fright at all, and would be in a better situation to perfect any of those skills pieces or knowledge that they've acquired.
I have a question for you then. So do you actually advocate for people to go quickly through a lot of repertoire rather than polish it, let's say, to a 100%?
No.
You
I'll
do.
explain that. I feel like just like with a great workout, we have to have something that pushes our muscles to where they're exhausted. And we also have to have a good amount of just walking outside and getting a breath of fresh air. And just like with a great diet, you need to have a salad, and you also need to have a good source of protein, two things at the opposite ends of the spectrum. I think that when we're picking the best possible repertoire for a student or ourselves, we should have a piece that's challenging. We should have something that pushes us to discover new ways of contorting our arms around the instrument so that we can access all these notes at the same time. And also, we should have quite a few things in the repertoire that will enable us to aim for perfection. So if one is only surrounded by the most difficult works, that person will eventually drop their standard. So they will start to compromise, and they will eventually think, well, all I'm playing is fingered octaves. They don't have to be in tune, right? But if one only plays easier pieces, and I don't want to say that any composer, any piece, or any style is easy, but let's say that they're playing an early Mozart sonata, which is, let's say, easier for coordination and easier for the left hand. If one only plays pieces like that, then their extended technique won't be quite as developed, and their endurance may not be either. So I think that we should have a piece, at least one piece, at which we can aim for perfection, however impossible that actually may be in real life. And we should have a piece for sure that we cannot this year play on stage, but we're aspirationally looking at what it can give us, and maybe in 2 years we'll be able to handle it, and then that feels like you're actually jumping over a much higher of a bar than you had set for yourself earlier.
So am I understanding that you recommend having a piece that you could perform within, let's say, the next few months or within that year, but also have an aspirational piece that you chip away at on the back burner?
Absolutely. And when we're talking about, especially in the American system where we have studio classes, some places around the world have studio classes as well, I think. But if we are thinking about something to perform publicly for a ticketed event, or to do a recording for a competition or auditions coming up, then we should stick to the pieces that we know we can truly deliver. But we should not shy away from playing in studio class or in front of friends pieces that we're just learning now, or parts of pieces. Let's say someone has just finished the G minor fugue and they would like to start the A minor. Instead of playing other easier movements just so that they can maintain the reputation of how well they played the G minor, they should start on the A minor right away and play at least parts of it for friends and their studio.
I like how that actually challenges you, puts you in a position of pressure, doesn't it? It's very much similar to a martial arts training. You're forcing yourself to get comfortable with discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that's the mindset that translates from martial arts to violin.
Well, something else. I remember, Dr. Lynn, you were talking about the white belt mindset.
Yes,
and I'll let you talk about that.
Oh, you talk about it.
Oh, okay. No, I remember having a discussion with you, Dr. Lynn, and what Dr. Moni was talking about, about playing new different pieces, is like it's all he mentioned, easy pieces, more difficult pieces, and it's like every piece had something to offer in what he just said. And you were talking about the white belt mindset, where everything, we were always approaching it like a beginner. You assume nothing, and you just try everything with the wide open eyes to learn something else. And I think this is one of the most important things for a person in any craft, any discipline.
I agree. So let's review this question, Anne's question. Is there one crucial mindset that makes you excel both in violin and martial arts? Now, here's something here that, hi, Evan. So does this same method also come to practicing scales and etudes? I'd like to address this. So what I mean by that mindset, a white belt mentality. White belt mentality meaning that this is how I learned about the white mentality. So I walked into a martial arts training for the first time as a mature athlete. I felt very, let's put it this way, a fish out of water. Bear in mind that I was never athletic in my earlier years, only in the second half of my life so far. So me being put into a very, let's say, genuine training felt very different from just a generic gym class. So all of a sudden I was put into this position where I was uncomfortable, learning skills that I had never done before and feeling very clumsy about it. Who's clearly the white belt? Me. And so with this experience, I suddenly learned what it felt like to have this humility. That's one of the important values that I learned as well. Taking this sense of I'm a beginner, or if you want to substitute the word, I'm a white belt. Please teach me. What is this one crucial mindset? Assuming that you are a beginner, assuming that you are a sponge, assuming you have the capacity to learn everything like you are a beginner, a young child, like absorbing new language and learning how to walk for the first time, learning how to draw a bow very smoothly from frog to tip. I mean, even to this day, after decades of playing the violin, I will still pick up the bow. And this is a question that someone had asked, how do I address a shaky bow? Well, I actually will take the bow and pretend, let's see, what does it feel like as a beginner to put the bow on the frog and draw it to the tip? Do I feel which muscles are engaging or not engaging? And this starts to get into the practice of being very aware, like centering the mind and focusing the mind so that you start to become, let's say, better aware of what you're doing in your body and your mind. Even just a slow scale, slow etude to address Evan's question. Yes, you can take this white belt mentality and apply it to the fundamentals. So back to long tones, back to the 1 minute bow, back to shifts, even just to a C major scale. How about just open strings, white belt mentality, returning back? So yes, I mean, Dr. Moni, you said we need to challenge ourselves and play aspirational repertoire that challenges us beyond our, let's say nuts and bolts of violin technique. But I also really like to go back to what it means to be a white belt, because I see so many times in the dojo that the higher belts, green belt and higher, also need to review what it means to have the white belt skills, the yellow belt skills, and maybe even the orange belt skills, because they've forgotten. I sometimes forget, oh, how do I change the string? How do I cross the string? And I have to teach it to someone. So if I have to teach it to, let's say, a equivalent of a white belt, I have to actually study that technique, assume the mentality of a beginner. How would a beginner learn how to cross the string from D to A, or how to play a double stop with absolute evenness between the two strings? Then it's very beneficial for an upper belt to learn what it means to be a white belt, and vice versa. And that's what I actually love about martial arts training, because I noticed that all the lower belts will train with the higher belts. And that's very fascinating, because obviously the lower belts will learn from the higher belts' experience, but vice versa. The higher belts will then be able to be given an opportunity to review their fundamentals. And it's a beautiful analogy for violin playing. A teacher can learn so much from teaching a beginner student or working with a beginner student, because they see things from their perspective again.
Yeah, this is so beautiful. It really is. Let me also participate a bit in the discussion of the beginner's mind and putting on the white belt every day, regardless of what belt on you had the night before. First of all, the beginner's mind, something comes to mind. One of the first books to introduce Zen to the West is called The Zen Mind, The Beginner's Mind. I think it's written by a gentleman named Suzuki, not to be confused with the Suzuki method. But more recently, there was an Apple original podcast, I think, that came out with Yo-Yo Ma, and it's called The Beginner's Mind as well. So that may be an interesting parallel there. But I've had a few violin teachers, and the last one that I had was the one that I studied with the longest, and it was Midori, the violinist. And I remember that my first few years of studying with her, I was also doing judo, and I was doing judo on the same day as my violin lesson because I was doing it 4 times a week back then. And I would hear some of the same things said by my judo instructor as I would hear from Midori. Both of them did not know each other. They didn't know about each other's art at all, but I would hear some of the verbatim, some of the same comments from both of them. And the judo instructor, he's about my age, but he's been in Olympic Games, and he has medals from multiple Olympic Games. He learned judo as a kid from his father, who was also a judo champion. And so he had won gold in Youth Olympics. And then he went to one of the famous universities in Japan, Tenri Daigaku, which is a judo-based kind of university. And then as soon as they go in as freshmen, they are white belts. Doesn't matter how good they were before that. So for the first year, he mostly practiced uchikomi, which is the art of falling without hurting yourself, which is also a way of reducing your sense of pride, a way of truly putting on the white belt. When you see these other kids who may not have your skill, they're practicing actual moves, they're sparring, and all you're doing is you're looking at them and you're practicing falling down. And then that gives you something that appreciates so much more when you're actually given the chance to do something, to do a particular actual interesting move on the violin or on the mat. And I used to travel with Midori quite a bit. I still actually just a couple of weeks ago, we shared the same dressing room for a concert. And I remember how she used to warm up every single day. Doesn't matter what she played the night before. She would start with an open D string, and it was never another string. It was the D string. And I would ask her, why is it the D string? She said, it's the most neutral. The E string is too easy. The G string puts too much strain on the shoulder, so I will start with the D string. And she would then play what she used to call a simple scale, which is 1 bow per note, 2 octaves, no shifting, and try to get her shoulders to relax into the instrument from throat to tip, for her left hand to sink into the instrument without the need for any kind of extra pressure. And after the end of her warm-up routine, which was extensive, it's a little over an hour, she would be playing 15ths on the violin with her tiny hand. But she started with open strings, and she never skipped that warm-up. I remember this one time where I think going to Peru and missed flight, whatever. We got there a little later than we thought we were going to get there, and she's about to go and rehearse the Sibelius Concerto with the orchestra, and they're already practicing the overture. So she has about 15 minutes in a practice room, and 15 minutes in a practice room, she's doing the slow bow. She's going through her normal warm-up routine. She doesn't have an hour and a half. She has 15 minutes, but she doesn't cut that warm-up routine. After the rehearsal was over, and I said, after it's a long flight, from LA to Peru, it's, it looks close on the map, but it's actually as far as to go to Europe. And I said, why didn't you skip a little bit of the warm-up routine just so that you can try some of the passages in the last movement, maybe the cadenza in the first movement? And she said, no, but I can't skip my warm-up routine. And I said, well, today was a different circumstance. And she said, well, if I skipped it today, then I'll find the reason to skip it 2 weeks from now. And then before you know it, I'm skipping it most days. And then I'll be the last person to notice my general level going down. So there are certain principles that I think we should use in our practice, and putting on the white belt every day is one of them. Getting to know the geography of the fingerboard every morning, regardless of how difficult the pieces were last night.
So very much like the practice of reviewing your kata and your basic forms in martial arts. Okay, that's interesting. It's a different philosophy. I had a friend come in and do a guest workshop for my VIP students, and he, it was a very similar thing where he promoted the idea of this religious warm-up or technical routine. And Raphael Hochman, principal cellist of the Edmonton Symphony, I'll have to say hi. Hi, Raph. It was his birthday yesterday. But that is interesting because you have to find that time. And that's interesting because I remember when we got up this morning, and I know Chen, it was late at night for you. Moni, you said we had to go lift. Is this your warm-up routine for the day or to get you started? To lift weights?
No, I'm going to be staying in school until later today, so I just decided to get the workout done in the morning.
Okay. Now I'm curious, Chen, do you have a warm-up routine for your day?
For my day or for my violin practice?
Oh, I want to hear both. I want the inside scoop.
Okay, for my day, yes, I warm up with several sets of 20 to add up to 100 squats, 100 push-ups, and 100 sit-ups in the morning, just to get the engine firing. And yes, I do stretch and do knee rotations and all that before. Otherwise, I can't walk properly in the morning. Then for my violin practice, yes, I will go, as I had said, my calibration of just I start with scales with my breathing to set my mind, and I won't move from my scales until I feel settled. After that, I do my double stops and arpeggios, and everything is just until it gets to the point where I feel like I'm just touching the strings and they stop. The bow, I'm playing, maximum volume with absolutely no muscle effort. And at that point, that's when I take a little break and get ready to do my etude or whatever for the day.
Wow, that sounds like an extensive routine.
I use it to time how long I'm going to let because what I'll do is before I practice, I boil eggs for my egg salad. And while doing my warm up, that's when I'm letting them sit in the hot water and get hard boiled. So I time it to make sure that my eggs are, because I hate peeling like half boiled eggs because it's all messy and stuff. So I make sure I do it long enough, my calibration, so I can peel hard boiled eggs.
That is brilliant. So we've got a cooking show time combined today. Cooking with Chen. The perfect hard-boiled egg. Go through your double stop routine, your long term.
Oh dear.
Hey, do you have a similar culinary treat, a secret for us?
I'm a one meal a day person, so I only eat. I've been doing that for the last maybe 8 years. So no calories for 23 hours, and then when I'm done at the end of the day, I make one big meal, and that's it.
Wow.
So when I get to cooking my meal, it's usually after everything else that I've done during that day, and so it's a pretty meditative experience because I want to eat everything in the fridge, but I try to prepare things slowly, and I listen to a podcast or a book or something. So resisting delving into the food right away before it's done, it's a good practice for me.
That's kind of my day yesterday. I felt myself so hungry after finishing teaching, and I felt, it's just so hungry, and I had to prepare a meal for myself, but nope, I actually snacked while I prepared the meal. No hard-boiled eggs, but it was, I think, almonds. That was what it was. Let me see if there's any other lingering questions that we can answer. There were so many that we can't possibly get to all of them, but let's just remind everybody that we can find Dr. Chen on Facebook, YouTube. Please look at the spelling carefully of his name and type that in to find Dr. Goh. You can find him playing, you can find him teaching, and you can find Dr. Moni Simeonov on zenviolin.com. You can see that in the screen, as well as on Instagram, Zen Violin. And of course, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Violin Kuo. Because I want to be respectful of your time, and it's getting very late for you, Chen, 1 a.m. in the morning, I'm going to make a last call for questions. So whomever's left watching, you're a trooper. Please send in your questions. This will be last call for questions, unless we feel extra generous. I'll remind you that we have my freebie, the practice guide. Here, I'll type that into the chat. Maybe that's a better idea. So we have the practice guide there for everyone to download for free. You can get that for free, and it will take you into 2 free previews of my practice techniques course. I'm gonna watch the chat for any last final questions that we can answer easily. If I didn't get to your question, my apologies. It's probably because it was maybe a bit too intense of a question that we couldn't possibly answer for you unless we could see you playing and we get into a further discussion, and we would be here till 24 hours from now. Oh yes, there's a last question that came in from both live and pre-submitted question about practice journal. Where is that? Joanna. Hello, Joanna. Can you show or describe the style of your practice journal if you have one? So that's a great question because we have that also from A. Smike. Do you use a practice journal, and how does it look? How does it look? Anyone?
I'll say something. So I used to write down things like realizations that I came into while practicing, and it wasn't anything metaphysical. It was just things like, oh, you should keep your elbow here because it helps with double stops, I used to do a lot of that, and then I realized that sometimes it's a little bit too subjective, because what does it mean to have a higher elbow? What does it mean to have a straighter finger or something like that? So I decided to turn that part of my practice journal into something that I use the video function of my phone for. So I would video myself when there's something, a realization that I wanted to share with a student or a friend, or something that I wanted to just remind myself the following day. But in terms of practice journaling, I think one of the most successful uses of a practice journal would not be so much to journal after the practice is done, but to plan on what you would like to achieve with the practice. So, and I would even do that before the practice day begins. So, for example, today is Tuesday. I would say that today you should be doing the practice planning for tomorrow, not for today, because today you're already under the influence of overt ambition or laziness or indifference. And when you're practicing for the day after, you're a lot more objective, and you can set those goals more specifically. And the goals could be, practice my concerto for 45 minutes, sonata for 30 minutes, Bach for 30 minutes, orchestra excerpts for 10 hours. But it could also be something that's a little bit more subjective, such as be able to memorize the second movement of your concerto by the end of the day, which leaves it a little bit more open-ended. I would like to stick with the more objective goals that it's just better for longevity. Because if you give yourself something that's a little too large every day, eventually you'll stop planning for the future. But it's good to be realistic. And I know there's like an orchestral audition coming up, and you have to practice 15 excerpts, and you only have 6 hours to practice, and I think that 6 is too much. But how are you going to schedule those 15 excerpts within the 6 hours of warming up concerto, Bach, and the excerpts? So it's good to have little plans like that, and I think they may take the magic away from it, but they will give you a job. So,
Dr. Goh, why are you laughing?
Because Dr. Moni, what he said is true, but it's the way he put it was hilarious. Yeah, but if I may add something, he was talking about the goal setting and subjective versus objective, and it reminds me of something that here's my first book recommendation of the night, Zen in the Martial Arts by Joe Hyams. Hyams, Hyams.
Okay.
And the guy studied with Bruce Lee. He studied with a number of people, and he put a lot of good things in there. And he was saying there was one story where there was a student that said, he went to a master. He said, I want to become a great master. And he asked, how long do I have to study? I practiced. And the guy said, 1 year. And he said, I'll be the hardest working student of yours ever. I'll do this and that. And he said, okay, great. Good for you. 2 years. And he said, no, but I'll work, triple hard. And the guy said, awesome. 5 years. And he said, how come every time I want to work harder, it becomes longer? And, that I have to study. And the master said, if you have one eye on the goal, you have only one eye left to look at the path. So the thing is that I agree completely with what Dr. Moni said. Instead of yes, I do keep a mental idea of what I want to accomplish and everything, but I keep it open-ended because I realize there's a physical limit. And a lot of times, being the aggressive person that I am, I may overestimate how much I can actually accomplish in a day. So I have to remember I may have a physical limit and I won't realize till I hit it. So I'm just going to practice, just healthy practicing to the best of my mental ability until that's it. My body won't do more for the rest of the day. And I don't look at the time. I purposely don't look at the time because otherwise I'm going to sit there and stress myself and I won't accomplish as much. I just get done everything that I can physically and mentally accomplish, and that's it for the day.
Open-ended. Yeah. Exploratory. Feeling it as an organic process. Yeah. I like this question because I like a combination of both. When I'm really regimented, I will crack out my practice journal. This is about the third one. This is quite a big version. I usually have a smaller one. But what I do with myself is do what Dr. Moni said. I try to establish first a goal. And I talk about this with my students, and it's in my course called Practice Techniques. So if you want to get a taste of it, grab that guide that I mentioned, lynnkuo.com/practice-guide. So I actually take the date, I put my goal, I just give myself an objective for that day so that I'm not scattered. It's about focus, that martial arts inspired focus. You're going to be in the dojo training, but do you have a purpose? So you're going to be in your practice room. Do you have a purpose? Is it because you have a concert the next day? Well, maybe that's your objective, to get the repertoire ready for tomorrow's concert. That's your first. Let's put that out first. Put that fire out first. So I'll put that down. Between 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. This is what I'm reading right now out of my journal. Then I know that I'm going to enter into my optimal brain zone. So therefore, I will write down 1 minute meditation. And when it's done, I'll put a timer on. I use a timer on a good day when I'm not doing my organic exploratory style of practicing, which I love to do as well. When I want to do a more regimented style, I'll put on a timer, simple timer. I'll try to put my phone on airplane mode if I'm really, really behaving. And then I'll write 1 minute meditation, check that off. And I find the check marks extremely powerful because so many times as a violinist, we're constantly criticizing ourselves. That was out of tune. I wasn't steady with my pulse. That was pretty bad. So all of that negative self-talk builds up in the brain and becomes this radio station that plays. Now we're going to be talking about psychology, about the psychology of performance. I talk about this with my students as well when I coach them. We want to change that radio station. So the check marks in a practice journal for me are very important. When I do something that I hear is very successful or has worked, I will take the time to pick up that pen and give myself that validation that I did something well. It's like giving a young child a sticker. They love stickers. We're no different. As an adult, we want that dopamine hit, the equivalent of that sticker. So go ahead and give myself that check mark. Therefore, when I look back and flip back, I'll see, oh, I gave myself a check mark because I made that shift. And then we can start going into what Dr. Moni said, what made that shift successful. Then I play the detective, and I talk about this in my practice guide. One of the most important things you can do with a practice journal is to become a detective in the practice room so that you're practicing smarter and not harder, so that you're notating what is it that makes it successful. Is it because you're simply focusing better? And maybe that's coming from martial arts discipline. Or maybe it's because you've actually been more aware of the tension in your body. Maybe that warm-up that we did, Midori style, helped to free the shoulder joint in the body, or helped you overcome an old injury. Therefore, technique that was difficult for you before suddenly becomes easier. These are discoveries that I will recommend people write down in their practice journey. Discoveries. You're a detective in the practice room, and you use this piece of paper. It doesn't even have to be a book. It can literally be a napkin if you don't have anything. It's always about progress and not perfection. So I plan my practice segments into Pomodoro timer segments, 25 minutes, and I build in a 5-minute break. In that 5-minute timer, I'll go stretch usually, or sometimes I will go get myself a snack or something like that. And then boom, that 5-minute timer is done. And I'll go back to another 25-minute segment, which I've already pre-planned for myself. And as Dr. Chen said, sometimes I will go off a little bit and deviate a little bit, and I will allow that. That's being human, and that's being exploratory, and that's being in the middle of a creative artistic process. That's what I do with my practice journal.
May I add one thing?
Yeah, of course.
I realized that I didn't fully answer the question. The thing is that I used to keep a practice journal, and the reason that I don't now is not that I don't find them useful. They are incredibly useful. Okay. The reason I don't anymore is that as soon as I discover something in my practicing that I know I need to do to improve myself, I actually sit there and practice it in such a way that it becomes a part of my being completely before I leave it. So in my mind, I have a constant running practice journal. And the thing that I know we don't have that much time, so I won't go into it too much, but instead of thinking judgmentally, I think analytically and with a positive outlook. And I do my best not to judge on anything that I'm doing. I analyze it, but I won't judge and degrade myself. I'll just say, is in tune or is not in tune? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful sound or is not a beautiful sound. And if there's something I have to learn, which happens basically every time I practice, I'm learning something. I work that in until it is so ingrained into my muscles that I never forget it. So I never have to consciously think about it anymore. It's there. So practice journals, yeah, I do support them completely. I don't mean to say that I don't support them at all. I do support them a lot, but it's how you use it. Do you write it down, or is it something that you ingrain into your muscles during your practice session every day? Whichever one it is, it's still a journal of sorts, and everybody should have them. Mm. So they asked, what does your practice journal look like? Well, you had one written down. Dr. Moni had another idea of it. Mine is a third idea, but they are all journals. They're all things thinking positively about how we're going to improve ourselves in our craft.
Mm-hmm. It's very much like people who train in the gym, or Olympic athletes who want to notate their progress as they train and keep track of their gains, right? This is very similar to us in the practice room. Let's take one final question from Facebook user. Which martial art practice do you recommend for a complete beginner and professional musician? It's a very much similar question up above. We had that question up above for what martial art do you recommend for, I think, a violinist?
Dr. Moni?
Is it a complete beginner violinist or a martial art?
Probably a beginner martial artist, I think.
Well, I would then recommend for that person, I don't know if they're a complete beginner in terms of body kinetics, but I would recommend for them to get used to doing some of the motions that are common in many of the martial arts, but have more to do with using body weight exercises and some lightweight exercises, just so that they can familiarize themselves with the way the body works before actually starting to use that body for more complex and compound motions. So simple things like squats and doing maybe wall push-ups or knee push-ups, even simply laying on the floor and getting up from the floor, laying on the floor and getting up. That's actually a pretty good cardio exercise. Being able to, walk with 2 shopping bags for 10 minutes, just stuff that introduces the body to some amount of strain in a controlled way, because in martial arts, however controlled it is, there are unpredictable elements. And in our own workout, there shouldn't be such.
That's very wise advice. But if someone were to choose a martial art, if they had let's say a buffet of martial arts and they said, which one would you recommend I start with?
Oh, yeah, I would recommend the one that's closest to home, because there is a critical mass of time that will have to take you to go to another place, and you will simply not go if it's too far. Let's say that there is something, so my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym is right on the other side of this river, and I cross it, and it takes me 40 seconds to get there. This is not the reason why I bought this place or why I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It just happens to be there. But I can tell you that if it took me an hour to get there, I would probably go there maybe once a week, and there are certain things that if it's convenient, you will end up doing it. So for example, if you go to a university and there is a team of a particular martial art, you're a lot more likely to do it than if you had to go and join a special gym somewhere far away, you have to drive to it. Because at the end of the day, and I literally mean at the end of an actual day, when you're tired and you want to just go home and maybe watch Netflix and just relax, and then you're on the fence, should I go, should I not go? If it's convenient, you will do it. If it's inconvenient, you will not do it. And over the course of a few years, that adds up to a lot of missed practice opportunities.
I'm laughing because that was me last night. You said closest to home, otherwise you won't do it. What if it was a Zoom class and you still didn't train? What if that couch was closer? Self-compassion. Yes, we practice self-compassion. Forgive yourself. Some days you need rest. So that's another thing I would like to point out. How important is rest in terms of to balance out physical training, as well as to balance out, let's say, training for a big audition. You practice 6 hours a day, which we acknowledge is too much. How important is rest when you're about to train for something big? This is maybe my final topic of questions. Sorry, Matthew, I know you had a question about scales. We kind of did address it. Yeah. Any thoughts on rest in training?
I guess I'll take that one. When it comes to rest, it depends on the type of training you're doing, but I'll say this. When I practice really, really intensely, my brain uses so much energy, I physically feel tired. And occasionally I will have to take a nap. I think rest is very underrated by some people. They think just push, 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 push. But if for those of us who exercise in a gym a lot, we realize how important rest is for our bodies. After you finish tearing all that muscle and it has to rebuild, you need to give it time to rebuild. It has to have that. And I forgot, I didn't answer that other person's question about the martial art. Moni was saying something about close to home. I agree with that, but if the choice is there, and by the way, I do second Dr. Moni's thing on getting some sort of physical awareness and preparedness before you do something to make sure that you don't, you have to be healthy enough to do this activity before you do it. Okay. But once you're there, especially for an older musician, I would very much recommend Chen style Tai Chi.
Okay.
And then the rest. Yes. I remember somebody telling me, I don't know how true it is because this is secondhand information, about David Oistrakh. He would have a weird sleeping pattern of 6 hours at night and a 4-hour nap in a day. And they asked him 4 hours. So it's 10 hours of sleep. And they asked him, why are you doing this? And if this is secondhand information, so I don't know if it's true. I haven't tried to verify it, but I believe his response, reported response, was any more than 6 hours is too long to spend away from the violin. I don't know how long he practiced, but he would get up, practice. Before he went to sleep, he was doing something on the violin. So yeah, that was his response. But either way, thinking about that, he planned rest into his day.
Speaking of rest, it's getting very late for you. So before I close this live stream up, I would like to invite everyone watching, remaining here. There's a few of you diehards still watching. I would like for you to get your thumbs active here. We don't smash people with our thumbs. We show love. I would like you to get those thumbs and to put them into good use. I want you to show how much you loved this live stream, how much you love the conversation, how much you love the violin. Go ahead and put in your favorite heart, thumbs up, sticker, emoji, and show how much you appreciate this conversation. Dr. Moni and Dr. Chen, thank you so much for donating your time to answer all these questions and for participating in this international discussion. While people do that, I do have maybe two cheeky little questions for you. You ready for them? You're ready, right? Okay. Okay, hypothetical question. Okay, do you do weapons? You do weapons, right? No? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Would you do a weapons demonstration with a carbon fiber bow? It's applicable, no?
How do I answer this without incriminating myself? In front of a small orchestra rehearsal, chamber orchestra that I kind of put together, that I was kind of directing, kind of sort of, and I did have a carbon fiber bow with a car finish on it about 20 plus years ago. I might have somewhat done a little bit of a eskrima, the stick fighting demonstration in the air, and yeah, it may have gotten a little bit out of hand, kind of, sort of, if memory serves me. Maybe I got hit in the head with it or something, so I can't remember it so much, or maybe it was a traumatic experience. But yes, it was a very fun event. Dr. Moni.
You got hit in the head and don't remember?
That's
Just
why
an
he doesn't remember. Yeah, I haven't done any weapons before. I mean, when I was little, I played with sticks and nunchucks and stuff, but I haven't actually formally learned weapons.
Okay. Yeah, neither have I. I mean, I did one training session years ago. They suddenly surprised us with a bokken, and I have a video of it, and I was like a deer in headlights. I thought, what, you want me to do with this? I said, okay, it's like a violin bow. It's like a violin bow. Oh yeah, there's this 6'3", sixth Dan going, okay, left, right, pat, boom, same side. I go, boom, 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 ka, 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 boom, boom. It was the most frightening thing I've ever done. But I'm all for it now. I'm ready because I'm doing Tai Chi, and then one day I want to get to that point where I can get the weapons, and then one day I'll do it with my carbon fiber bow, and then maybe smack Dr. Chen in the head. I'll get to that point. You know, I would do a love tap, right? Boom. Okay, one final question, and thank you so much for showing the love. Any of you out there still watching, show your appreciation for our guests. My final question is, okay, so we all know Karate Kid, legend, the whole culture. Are you Cobra Kai or are you Miyagi Do? My final question.
Dr. Moni?
I think Miyagi Do, but I haven't seen there is some sort of a spin-off that I think was recently on one of the stream. I've only seen the original.
Okay. Yeah, so Cobra Kai is the series on Netflix, yes. And it's definitely a battle between Cobra Kai Dojo and Miyagi Do Dojo.
Miyagi Do for me.
Yep.
I would have to say Miyagi Do for a completely on my side.
Oh, actually, I'm surprised with you, Dr. Chen. I thought you might tip over to Cobra Kai.
What? I'm a nice guy. I mean, it's been at least 3 weeks since I threw a student out the window. Joke. It's a joke, please. Joke. Big joke.
Okay, so I'm the third. I'm definitely Miyagi Do as well. So that's the three of us, the three Miyagi Dos. Okay, so that's great. We're on the same team, fighting for the same team. Okay, so thank you so much for all of you still watching. You made it to the end. Congratulations. You've completed training on October 17th with Dr. Moni, Dr. Chen, and Dr. Lynn. We'll give you an honorary belt. Let's put it that way. We'll give you an honorary belt. We'll have to show everyone the successes of this live stream on replays. You will see it on all of our channels, hopefully, in the coming days and weeks. Thank you so much for attending. You can find Dr. Moni on Instagram and on his website, Zen Violin. You can find Dr. Chen as Dr. G on YouTube. Go search his name. Look at the spelling of his name. Chia-Chien Goh. Go look at that spelling carefully and go search him up on Facebook and YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook as well. Violin Kuo. Thank you so much. And thank you, Justice. I see you. Thank you very much for attending. Hello, hello. All right, so if you have any questions for us, feel free to contact us through any of those channels. And I'm assuming that we're all very much going to be welcoming all of your comments after the fact. Tell us what you thought, because we'll be very happy to hear what you thought. We can continue the conversation through any of those channels, and we wish you a great day. Dr. Chen, hope you sleep well. Dr. Moni, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you so much to you both for participating in this. This was a very iconic and landmark live stream event. I hope it won't be the last. So with that, I will bid everyone adieu and os. Thank you so much. Os. Os. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.